Growing a fruitful garden, there's nothing better. The cultivation of our favorite crops in anticipation of a harvest. We can watch the seemingly endless videos of people harvesting unreal bounty, making it look so easy. And sometimes it is. Sometimes everything just clicks and the plants thrive, producing even better than you could have hoped for. But not always. From time to time, things are going to go wrong. Sometimes it's our fault directly, and often it's our fault for things that we've done along the way, indirectly. Hi, I'm Jeff from the Ripe Tomato Farms, and welcome to part 4, the final video in our series, Growing Your First Garden. And today, we'll talk all about harvesting our favorite crops, no doubt, but more importantly, how do we actually get there? So this video is all about happy, harvesting, and healthy. And as it's the culmination of our 4-part beginner series, I just want to thank you guys so much for watching. And hopefully, we've all learned a thing or two along the way. Like we touched on in part 3, some plants are easier to get to harvest than others. Crops harvested for just their foliage, such as lettuces, spinach, herbs, and kale, are almost always able to provide at least some harvest, making them not only great for beginner planters, but also necessary crops for all gardens. And this is because they allow us to harvest throughout the year, pulling bounty from the garden at regular intervals instead of all at once. True gardening nirvana, however, happens when those leafy crops support multiple harvests. And then on top of that, the longer fruiting favorites pile on at the end to make the rewards even bigger. And to achieve that kind of harvesting, that level of production just in our backyard, means we need to keep the plants happy. And so far, we're on the right path. We've talked about proper planting techniques, timing of both direct seeding and transplanting, as well as early seed starting and soil building. But to continue that trajectory and to keep our plants healthy and functioning all the way up until harvest, this is where we really earn our stripes. So here's 5 things that we can do during the growing season to make sure our plants stay happy. We do our job so that they can do theirs. Soil is the foundation for each crop's success. It's often also the source of unhappy plants, and it's the first place I look when a crop begins to fail. Extreme pH swings, too wet, poor drainage, poor aeration. These are all things that'll manifest themselves into subpar growing. If the environment isn't right, then neither are the plants. So build your soils. Like we said in part 2, grow your soil so that it can grow your plants. And here's a few ways to do that. First, try not to till or rotivate the top layers of soil. You really want to minimize that disturbance. Treat your soil profile like it's a living organism. Second, avoid walking on your garden directly. You really want to eliminate compaction in the garden. Air gaps within the soil are more important than you can possibly imagine. Next, chop and drop spent plants and crops to add some organic matter back into the soil, as well as to protect it. Also, inoculate your garden with compost, and not just for the nutrients. Remember, compost is just teeming with life at the micro level. And finally, employ cover crops in the off seasons to keep that soil web functional and active. Take care of your soil. It's the single most important component of your garden. All right, number 2 on our list of keeping our plants happy is mulching. Mulch is like a suit of armor for your garden. Wonderful, organic, multifunctional armor that'll protect your soil and plant roots from temperature extremes, drought, freeze-thaw action, heavy precipitation, weed outbreaks, and exposure. Mulch is the single easiest, most effective way to raise your garden to the next level. You'll quickly learn that exposed soils can become dead soils. Nature designs soil to be covered at all times, in all seasons. And you'll find that exposed soils just take matters into their own hands and that's when you get an explosion of weeds. Bare soil is like a blank canvas, and weed seeds are the paint. They'll quickly fill in every available space as soon as the water and light hit them. It's just the nature of weeds, and a thick layer of mulch is your single biggest tool to combat this. Mulch with straw, grass clippings, shredded leaves, or even with the spent plants themselves, using the chop and drop method. Even seeded rows of your carrots, beets, lettuce greens, and radishes can be lightly mulched with a fine straw or some loose grass clippings. Anything to cover that bare soil. Not only that, your mulch is going to add some organic matter back to your soil profile, not to mention some nutrients in the case of grass clippings or other green mulches. Once you plant, your next step is to mulch, even before the first watering. And speaking of watering, no single activity generates more questions than when and how often should I water. Unfortunately, there is no answer. Nobody can actually tell you how often to water. The answer is different for every climate, region, soil type, crop, and time of year. It's impossible to answer, yet it's the number one question. Frustrating, right? Well, there are a couple of watering tips that'll make sure your plants stay in that happy zone. First is the time of day. Morning is the best time to water your plants, followed by afternoon, followed by evening. Let me explain. Watering in the morning sets up the plants for the day, when most of the action is going to happen. Less water is going to evaporate when it's cooler out, and the plants will be sure to have available moisture for the heat of the day. Afternoon watering can see a lot of moisture lost to immediate evaporation, so it's not really the most efficient. But on those really hot days, it's better than nothing. Evening should be avoided as a lot of water is lost to drainage overnight. As well, a wet, cool garden is ripe for fungal outbreaks and possibly rot. And speaking of watering your plants, water the roots, not the leaves. It's the roots that use the water, so make it available to them instead of blasting the foliage. And when you do water, really soak the garden thoroughly and deeply. Avoid infrequent shallow waterings. You want to train those roots to expand and go downwards. Shallow-rooted crops are much more susceptible to drought and exposure than plants with deep, elaborate root systems. Even more than the actual planting and harvesting, watering your plants gives you the most interaction with your garden. Take care to do it properly. And what about us container gardeners, where it feels like we're watering every day in the summer? How do we deal with that? It's tough, because you know the plants need water, and the pots themselves don't hold on to nearly as much of it as, say, a raised garden bed. Not only that, they lose much more water in the heat of the day. But in direct conflict with this, every time you water, it flushes the soil of both organic matter and nutrients. That's both costly and inefficient. Well, one trick the pros use to solve this is to water from below. Simply place your potted plant into a tub of water for a few hours and let it soak up as much water as it needs. It really works, and it saves not only time, but also money, in that you don't have to constantly fertilize. All right, back to the dirt. One way to supercharge your soils, and thus your plants, is to amend it. Now, this is a little bit different than outright fertilizing, because it's more of a slow release, soil-based focus, rather than a hard hit of liquid or chemical nutrients. Amend the soil with things like alfalfa meal, canola meal, rock dust, rock phosphate, and of course your compost. These slow-release additives will feed both your soil and your plants over time. And that's going to ensure that the natural nutrient cycles are operating at a high efficiency and with maximum effect. And it's not just the current crop. Amending and building your soil this way will have profound effects on future crops. And you'll find that unlike big agriculture, your soil will get better and healthier over time, resulting in those happy plants that we're after. And the fifth way to ensure happy plants is to give them their space. Allow the roots the room they need to support the plant, and give the foliage the space to flourish and grow to their full potential. No doubt as you get more experience, you'll experiment with some companion planting and more elaborate groupings of crops, but for now, keep it simple. Observe proper spacing for the best results. All right, the whole point of a garden is to get that delicious harvest, right? All those crunchy carrots, those plump tomatoes, the crisp lettuce, and the sweet, sweet peppers. There's nothing like it, and it makes all the effort so worthwhile. Now, every plant has its ideal window to harvest. Some are larger than others. For instance, while immature baby carrots are so delicious and super sweet, green peppers have a fraction of the nutrients of the fully ripened ones. Which, side note, is a shame because I really like green peppers. Anyway, beside the point. While a vine-ripened tomato is a thing of beauty, your zucchinis are better picked immature, as the larger they get, the more difficult they are to eat. And on top of that, some plants are going to ripen off the plant, like tomatoes and peppers, and others will not, like watermelons or strawberries. And just to add to the confusion, some crops are going to keep and store for months, like onions, garlic, and even potatoes. Others, like herbs and lettuce, should be used immediately. Heck, even a robust crop like corn is best eaten within hours of picking. Who would have thought that? Each plant is different and unique in terms of its harvest. And if you've taken the time to successfully grow these crops right to the end, it only makes sense that you maximize the bounty you get from them. Couple of quick tips though. Try to harvest early in the morning for maximum longevity of your produce. And try to use two hands when you are harvesting, as you don't want to damage the plants because there could be more fruit coming. Speaking of that, harvesting often begets more harvesting. What I mean by this is, for some plants, the more you harvest, the more your plants are going to produce. Herbs such as basil and dill will regrow stems and branch out with even more foliage with each subsequent harvesting. Crops like peppers will put more energy into the remaining fruit after an initial harvest, which is very handy to speed up ripening. Same with tomatoes. And if you're lucky and you grow more than you can immediately eat, look to freeze, dry, preserve, or make into your favorite sauces to maximize the use of the crop. Harvesting and efficiently using the plants you grow can be as tricky and nuanced as the growing itself. It's rewarding, no question, but a little bit of thought and planning at harvest time means you'll be enjoying your garden to the fullest. Which brings us to our final point on growing a garden, the effort involved and the effect that it can have on us. Once you get started and really catch the bug, this becomes a little more obvious. Gardening is what I would call a healthy hobby, in more ways than one. There's no doubt that spending time outside is good for the body and the mind. Stress, anxiety, boredom, depression, it can all be helped and lessened by being outdoors, either in nature or in your own greenscape. But I really think it goes deeper than that. Even the multi-generational shared experiences with our children, our parents, or even our grandparents, as amazing as they are, can be just the surface of what growing a garden can offer you. It can be an escape beyond deadlines, perfectionism, and the paralyzing control-focused tasks that inundate our everyday. You quickly learn that nature can't be controlled or pigeonholed, and the acceptance of this is a perfect release. It's a stress relief, even when things go bad. It really teaches you to roll with the punches, not to get too high in the good times, which helps you moderate the bad times. An even-keeled sort of zen that's very hard to find these days. Add in the exercise, stress relief, and the yielding of the freshest, healthiest foods you'll ever eat, gardening can be like a fountain of youth. Feeling better, eating better, and living better. That's what it's all about. If this is your first time growing a garden, I wish you all the success this year. There will be ups, and there's going to be downs. Even in the worst cases, you'll gain invaluable knowledge that can only be found through experience. And in the best cases, well, you'll see why growing a garden was one of the best choices you ever made. Hey guys, I just want to say thanks. Thanks for taking the time to join me as we touch on the foundational points to starting your first garden. It's a lot to absorb, I know. So I hope you'll revisit the videos throughout the year as you begin your growing journey. And as you do get planting and start to grow, check out my specific videos on individual crops for more in-depth information. Happy growing, guys. Hey, thanks so much for watching, guys. I appreciate the support more than you know. And if you're getting value from these videos, please like and share them to spread the word and help your fellow gardener to grow better.